All right, so we got this new 150 that this weekend at the Jackrabbits race got stuck in the water hole section and drowned the bike. So we are taking it apart. It read 0 on the compression gauge. And we're gonna see, with as much mud that came out of the pipe, and of course we didn't start filming until now, we're gonna see what this top end looks like when you submerge a bike. So. Ooh. You can see that all of that mud in there is not factory. Ooh. Did not come with the bike. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to split these cases to clean all that water out. It sat too long. The bike never restarted after it was submerged, so it just sat full of water. Ooh, yeah, the crank bearings are actually locking up on it. Quite a bummer with all of the amount of sand still in this. Yikes. So here we are with a 24 Husky 150 engine that was completely submerged in the muddy water, and we're gonna rebuild the crank, put new bearings in it, put a new top end in it. The rings on this thing are stuck, and then we're gonna get her back out on the trail and hopefully never do this again. Here we are taking off the countershaft sprocket. Sometimes it's easier to do inside the frame with the chain still hooked up, but doing here is the gear for the end of the magneto right here is pressed on, so we have to use a special tool to zap it off. So here what we're doing is we're putting pressure on this big bolt on the end of the crank. Never seen. Might start getting some algae in there from being submerged. And the grease still looks fairly there, but that's funny how all the bolts are green. Engine doesn't have a lot of time on it. Keep forgetting that they put E-starts on the 150s. Bit of water inside of the starter motor. Surprised there wasn't more in the stator cover for that.
It's true. I guess it drains.
Normally they have a weep hole on it on the older models.
Reeds are nice and caked with dirt.
Lots of mud in the reed cage. This whole intake track was just submerged. Got this fancy 3D printed clutch holder online. Keeps everything together, and also you can fill it full of oil and start soaking your plates. Very fancy design. Usually you'll make references here on which notch they got it in there. You can see the oil bolt holes and everything, but with the DDS clutches, you can change how much pressure is by just rotating these to the different tick marks that are right here. Like here's one, it's set on number 2, and then there's 3. And it'll give you different tension on how it kind of reacts on if it's got too much pressure, a little bit of light pressure. Just
different steps.
Yeah, different sizes through all that, so your clutch is a little bit tunable. I'll hear guys all the time like, oh, I need this lever or something to make the clutch pull lighter, and I prefer actually a stiffer clutch so it keeps all of the tension in there and doesn't slip on me. I don't go through clutches real crazy. But I'm also not that fast, so I don't have to worry about it.
Surprising that these don't have crank lockdowns.
It'd be so much easier, I think, on some
It's a
parts.
small bike. We got 2 on there.
Luckily, it doesn't look like any water went into the crankcases on this thing. I mean, it really couldn't unless it got through the vent. But it did go through the worst part of the engine. Take the water pump cover off.
Aggressive.
Let them in the shop for the realistically, the water pump doesn't need to be rebuilt, but we did get a whole kit for this engine from the factory with all the seals and O-rings and got that dowel pin nice and stuck in there, and you can be like everybody else and grab a screwdriver and pry the hell out of it so that it always leaks from here on out.
One of these days I want to do that while you're filming. Just it's a hack job.
Snap-on says this isn't a pry bar, but this screwdriver is definitely a pry bar. Now that they've gotten rid of like all the kickstart assembly, you know, all of it would normally be here, but they lighten up the cases and everything. And you'll hear guys all the time that are like, well, they took it off, now what? Well, they also took hand cranks off of the cars too 100 years ago, and we seem to have gotten by. Everything changes. Sometimes it would be nice to have a kickstart, but it's so much nicer having the push button. Reverse threaded on the crank nut for the primary gear. I've actually seen people take 1/2 inch impact guns and
they give you a left. Now.
I've seen them spin it all the way out and they're like, yeah, there's no more threads left on this crank. Like, dude, how many Ugga Duggas did you give it? Shift shaft out, and we're almost to the part where we start splitting these cases open. See that the top ring is stuck in there. The bottom ring still spins, but the top ring is actually completely done on that thing. And that could be for various reasons of trying to restart it with the water inside of it. If it was hot and then just stuck, it could be just stuck full of mud. I mean, there could be multiple reasons on why that thing's stuck. The thing we always talk about is just make sure you get the right tools, because you could really mess this stuff up by not having the right stuff. And I've used this crankcase splitter for over 15 years. He's got the same one. They work really good. So it just has a little threaded piece right here that you will tighten up against the end of the crank, and it puts pressure on everything, lifts it out, but leaves the crank still installed and gets it pulled out of that bearing. Oh, see, there it goes, starts popping.
Free.
See, as you start tapping it,
taps on the counter shaft.
just make sure that it comes off straight, but you can see it'll start splitting the cases even. Not tapping it with a steel hammer and breaking stuff. It's just got a little rubber mallet, so that way the end of the transmission comes out smooth. You see how it starts lifting up kind of sideways. That's just because the counter shaft is getting hung up on there, and it's not a big deal. It's just
In there sometimes helps.
should slide up. Alright, so now the cases have come off the end of the bearing. I'm going to go ahead and pull this thing apart. Look inside. Oof. This is the whole reason why we're doing this. You can see all this mud and rust. Like, these bearings don't even want to spin no more. This is terrible. See, all of it will pool in the bottom. This side, since it's split, because it's a two-stroke, you don't have no oil going into there. You don't. Everything on the transmission side is good, but this whole piece,
No bueno.
it is no good. So now we'll go ahead and pull the transmission out. It's usually easier to keep it all together, so that way you don't have to worry about everything falling apart. We do split all our transmissions and stuff here. This is such a new engine with no hours on it. Just an unfortunate accident that tranny doesn't need to be split. It's just crazy the amount of mud that's coming out of this thing. I mean, you'll see guys that like submerge their stuff and then they immediately flip the bike over, pull the spark plug out, get all the water out of it, just get it running. I mean, the best thing you can do is flush all this stuff out. I don't know if it would have helped with this one having the mud in it. I mean, this is... she's locked. Lots of damage. If you can see in there, and we'll pull it apart tomorrow. So we're gonna put a new rod in this thing, but the bearing is flat on the inside, so maybe you got it running and the water with the heat and everything just destroyed the connecting rod bearing. Either way, throw all this stuff in the cleaner, solvent tank, get it all cleaned up. Should have the rest of our parts tomorrow and we'll get it all installed. Need a little colder. Boom. Clean. See it instantly. I missed it on the shot,
Yeah,
but
you missed it.
got all the frost of it back to it.
A bit harder, huh?
It has the race on it, which you're going to want to heat up anyways for the crank.
Yeah. so?
Yeah. Huh. I'm wrong. Since all the bearings were sent through the solvent tank, we just want to make sure that they're all nice and oiled up before they get put back into the cases. A couple things we didn't show you while we were putting this together was we ended up putting a new rod and rod bearings inside of it, so it's cheaper and pretty easy to just put a whole new rod inside of the crank instead of replacing the whole crank. This one is still, it's as much movement as it has, it's locked up. But we didn't get it on film of the whole process of pressing the rod out, re-truing it, getting it ready to go. It's one of our engine service packages that we have here that we don't have to ship out for. We can do that in-house. Done plenty of them. The only part that was bad on it was the bearing. And it's nice and rusted. Done with that, yeah. Now we're lining the shift forks, getting everything all lubed up so that way the first startup until the engine oil actually gets inside of everything doesn't run dry.
Yeah, they screwed it up.
$17 by $26. So if it looks like a 26 on the outside. By 1 mil thick. Center cases on most Japanese bikes and some of these European stuff do not come with a gasket, so you have to actually bond the cases together. This is pretty cool that inside this gasket kit that Husky provides us, they actually give you a tube of the sealant they use. Otherwise you can use like a Yamabond 1211, something that is petroleum resistant and not orange. Make sure all the surfaces are nice and coated so that way when this thing goes together that no oil leaks out and it basically glues itself. Adding a little bit of 2-stroke premix into the bearings to make sure they don't start dry. Just slap her together. Most of the hang up is going to be on the actual dowel pins here. People will hammer them together and you do it however you want. We don't do it like that.
As I tighten these, I like to always come and make sure that my transmission still has some play.
You get stuff bound up.
if it's not set
Yeah,
right
it
to
wouldn't
where.
move at all. I mean, it's still in gear right now, so you hear it stopping, but it wouldn't move at all.
I've seen guys wedge the crank in when they're putting it together and it doesn't spin. They're like, it'll be fine. Okay. Everything gets done in a crisscross pattern to make sure that it's kind of symmetrical going in. You're not torquing one side of the cases and pinching those bearings.
They're all tight. Make sure we're still got some rotation. Still got some rotation. And this is when I take the opportunity to clean up any extra silicone that comes out. You want to watch this because anything that comes out goes in. So that's a pretty good line. We got our bottom end together. Now we're gonna, I like to do it basically dress this whole side and then I'll flip it over, dress that whole side. But first things first, when you put the case together, you want to get your shifty tents in and make sure all your shifting works. Because you don't want to do all of it, find out it don't. That's not fun.
It's easier to check it to see if it shifts cleanly now than to get everything back together and realize that you made a mistake. I've done that in my early days just multiple times of I've even put the engine back inside the bike in the frame. Like, oh yeah, we got first and second, that's it. So it's a good process to just double check everything right now. Oh no.
gotta make sure this sits inside that collar in there. That's what I'm trying to make sure. What got going on?
It's only because the camera's out.
Alright. Well, no, this one is definitely harder because it all has to go in at once. It's annoying. Now,
Each little notch on your star is an actual gear, and then the flat one up there is your neutral, so it's in between gears. But that's how you pretty much what is controlling your whole shifting mechanism. It's just that little tiny star and the way all the springs and your shifter comes in. This is your shift shaft, so when you click up on the gear, it will spin these and go ahead.
it's gonna spin really
Yeah, that's
fast.
what I was saying. You spin the other one, and well, just to check it, it's a lot of holding the gear up against itself because while it's actually spinning in the engine, these will have a little bit of resistance so that it'll click on itself pretty easy. So there's neutral. We got all 5,
Yep.
all 7, all 8. My mind can't even wrap around the old Husqvarna ones that were 8 speeds and stuff. Like,
Yeah, how's that even fit inside there? Alright, now that we know we shift, I like to get my pin. There's an O-ring inside there, so do a little grease on there, a little grease on our seal.
has to be completely sealed from the crankcase, otherwise it will suck all your transmission oil out and burn it. And then you can usually blow your clutch and then tranny bearings and stuff like that if it's not right.
It's not going that smooth, so we're gonna use a little more lube. I guess anything, but this one's pretty bad if it doesn't loose.
And it's reverse threaded. Again, still. Put the clutch together, and these baskets really are such an amazing piece that they're able to machine. It's also why they're so expensive. Using the Motion Pro gear jammer to be able to hold it while it gets torqued. And you'll see some guys that just air gun everything, and sometimes if you're putting too much pressure on these things, and it can really hurt your bearings if there's incorrect torque on it.
It's gonna flex a little. We're almost there.
such small plates in this engine.
Do you think it would do the opposite with these smaller bikes? They're working a lot harder.
If you haven't seen before, KTM has gone to a diaphragm clutch a few years ago, got rid of each of the little coil springs and just went into one big beveled spring. I think our bikes on the betas went to that in 2020. Little simple design, but it works pretty good. And then you have the different slots in there to put different tension on it, which is kind of cool. So you can really fine tune the way that you want your bike to